Gotta wait a little bit for see if anybody gets on here before I start. Really don't have much of a topic today, but we'll get started with something. I guess everybody's busy tonight, which is understandable. What, towards the end of July it is? I lose track of time actually. Oh, my phone's right here and I can't look at the date, so no big deal. Towards the end of July. See how long I can sit here and do nothing before somebody comes on here. It's gonna be boring if you have to watch it later. Real boring. But I tend to make boring videos, right? I don't know, the last one wasn't too bad. I enjoyed making that video. I'm working on another one. It's not diesel related, but it's stuff I have to deal with around the shop. It's a tool to help me around the shop. Let's see. After that, I've got a couple videos in the works that are diesel related, 6.0 diesel related. My biggest thing I want to do video wise is I've got two things I want to do. I've got the gray extended cab 0304 F250 with the 6-liter in it that I bought that doesn't run, and I'd really like to make that basically a rolling chassis, something I can pull the cab off but leave all the electronics to make the engine run, and put basically a seat on it and the brakes kind of fat up just so I can move it around, you know, with the steering. Maybe I'll cut the cab to where it's just the firewall left, but I want to gain access to all around the engine. That way I could I could change out injectors on it real quick and then run it and work on it and monitor things. And if I wanted to take it to the dyno like that, I could take it to the dyno like that. The next big thing that I'm really working on in my head is that fuel injector flow bench that I want to work on. I want to get it working because I have some ideas for some things, and I really want to be able to test injectors and really get into the nitty-gritty of those things, because there's information out there, but it's just like the injector videos I put out years ago where you couldn't find good detailed information about the 6.0 injectors, and I really want to put those out. I really want to put that kind of information out there. It's I just feel like all that's been out there long enough. Somebody else needs to mess with it and just give knowledge. So that, and I want to be able to rebuild injectors. I've got enough old ones sitting around that I'd have plenty of injectors to learn what to do and what not to do to fix them. And putting them on a flow bench, learning how to maybe match them. Say I had, 16 or more injectors, and I grabbed 8, and I started flowing them. I figured out across the board what they flow, and I got them within 5 or 10% of each other. And I think that would be really, really cool to be able to do something like that, and then offer to people a service, because 6.0s, and not just 6.0s, any Huey injection system, I could probably adapt to it, but it's getting to where there's a lot of reman injectors out there that just aren't great, and it'd be really nice to be able to offer a service where people could send their injectors to me locally. People further away may be tough, but I'd be able to flow them and then match them up and make them flow better. Dunbar repair. Alberta, Canada. DF Repair. Thank you for joining me. I think you've been here, last few times. I appreciate it. I know they can be boring sometimes, but I don't know. I enjoy getting on here and interacting with the few that are on here. Not many watch afterwards, and that's okay. Completely fine. It gives me some way to still put something out, or at least put myself out there and communicate with you guys. I'll probably go over, this Explorer behind me is a customer's car, and they're complaining that the AC was blowing hot and it was low on charge, so I charged it up. It was cooling, and they had mentioned that last year, and thankfully this customer, I gave them an extra car of mine to drive for the time being, which I don't normally do. But I've had this Explorer for a couple months now before it got really hot, but I've been working on it, trying to get things in, and it compounded into a bigger job. So they said that last year, towards the end of the summer, it quit cooling, and they heard a noise whenever it quit cooling. They heard something in the engine bay, and so then they got a hold of me springtime, and I was able to get it in. It had low refrigerant charge, Freon level, and I couldn't find any leaks. I topped it off, drove it, it was cooling for me, and I gave it back to them, and they said it would cool sometimes and sometimes it wouldn't, and what was it? Sometimes it wouldn't cool at all. So sometimes it would do a little bit, sometimes it wouldn't do it all, anything. And so I got it back in, was messing with it again, and it was acting like low charge. So I was checking levels, and it was a little bit low again, but this time, as I was charging it, it didn't cool down at all, and it actually made some noises from the compressor, what sounded like down in the compressor, from that area. And so messing with it some more, my pressures, the more I let the engine run and watch the AC, my pressures were doing weird things. The high side would go high, but then go real low, and it was all over the place. And I was suspecting a compressor failed, and so I tear it down. I do find junk in the system, and then the job got even worse because I was replacing stuff, going through, flushing lines that I could reuse, flushing the evaporator core. I replaced the condenser because it has the dryer built into the condenser, so it makes it very tough to flush those unless you have a very expensive machine to do it. And so I go to the back, because this has got rear AC in it, and the fittings where the lines that run the length of the vehicle, those lines then go into the lines that go into the back into the body. The fittings were seized. I couldn't get them apart. Fought them and fought them and fought them, and I could normally you can flush those lines that run the vehicle. There's short sections of flexible hose on them, but it usually doesn't have any effect as long as you get some good cleaner in there and flush it. And so since those fittings were stuck, I had to get new lines that run the whole vehicle, and that's what I'm working on now. The fuel tank is just behind me there, kind of underneath. You can see it underneath the tire. It's on a tranny jack, and I was hoping I didn't lower the rear subframe because I'm hoping that I could get the lines out without lowering the subframe, but I was able to get them out, but I had to bend them and actually break them in half to get them out. So I'm gonna have to do some kind of drop, whether it be a partial drop or something on that rear subframe. I think they would have come out fine if the way the engineers designed the heater lines and the AC lines start above and then they wrap around as they bend and go back. And so once you get the AC lines free, they're stuck above the heater lines up at the front here, so you can't actually drop them far enough to be able to shimmy them out. So I'll tell you what, engineers, it's like a dumb smart person. Just the stuff I see. I'm sure their hands are tied to an extent because the manufacturer wants them to do something as cheap as possible. But I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. So anyway, I'm hoping to have that done by. I'll probably be done after this. Being about 7:20, I'll probably be done. Go up, take a shower. But hopefully, maybe by noon, I'll have the AC lines. Well, I don't know. Tomorrow, I hope to have the AC lines in and flush the rear portion. New expansion valve in the rear, new expansion valve in the front. Start reassembling everything. I'd like to have the AC system buttoned up tomorrow because I had to do a few other things to this, but I really want to get this job done. It's just one of those that I've had here for a while that I've been able to push out of the shop and get other vehicles in, but I really want to get this one done. I had what was it, last week when I did a live stream, I had the 6.0 Power Stroke in here that I did. I was working on heads and head gasket studs and everything, and what was it? I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think I did. Whenever I tore it down, it had 20 millimeter block and heads. So the heads that I had on hand were 18 millimeter dowel, and this is the newer version of the 20 millimeter, newer version of the 6.0, and I forgot what version they call it, but the rocker box actually mounts different on the head. It uses 13 millimeter bolts instead of 10, and I want to say there's something a little bit different, that it just doesn't allow the rocker arms to line up the same way. So I had to order those heads, some actual 20 millimeter heads in, and hopefully they're correct, because I've ran into issues where for some reason it's hard to get these new style heads from aftermarket places. Ford, it's easy to do. You usually go by the VIN as long as the engine's the same, and you specify, they get it. I've always had good luck then. But I'm waiting on heads, and I was hoping to have them by Monday, but they didn't show up, and it doesn't look like they're going to show up this week. I guess they must have had to work on us, I don't know, get a set ready, or maybe they're just so backed up with jobs that it's going to take a little bit. Anyway, so I partially assembled it to basically put it back together. I dropped the cab back on it, dragged it out, and actually pulled in a couple other vehicles since then to knock those out, and now we're on to this one. So I'm hoping to have this one done tomorrow, so then I can get another head gasket job in, and that one's getting heads as well, because I used to not do O-ringed heads, but now, from my experience from doing O-ringed heads for customers, I used to get repeat failures occasionally, and I'd have to tear it back down and do head gaskets again, and I'd stud them at the same time. But now with the O-rings and studs, I don't have repeat failures. So I know it costs, I'm getting cylinder heads for like $1,800 for a pair, and that's O-ringed, ready to go on the engine. And I know it's a little bit, it's $1,800 over what I normally charge if it was just head gaskets and studs, but I'm saving the customer money down the road and saving myself money, because I wouldn't have to do a head gasket job again, and or the customer, say, a few years down the road, wouldn't have to do head gaskets again. And so it's just something they don't have to worry about. Let's see, what else? Oh, also, the 6.0, I was continuing to work on it and prep everything. I got the block prepped for the head gaskets. I still need to do an oil cooler, but I'm gonna wait till I get the heads back on. That way the oil doesn't drain down into the pistons or the cylinders. And almost all 6.0s anymore, whenever I pull, say I have to do an EGR cooler, an oil cooler, I have to pull the turbo out for something, I always tear the turbo down. Excuse me, burp. I pull the exhaust side off the turbo to clean the vanes and make sure the unison ring moves properly. And I was in the process of doing that one. It really wasn't heavily rusted, but it needed some cleaning. And when I was finishing up, I flipped it over, and I had oil coming through where the compressor wheel is, and I've never experienced that before. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, did I spill oil somewhere? And I'm looking, make sure I didn't spill oil into the compressor housing or something like that. And it wasn't. I ended up taking the compressor housing off, and it was actually, it was coming from the compressor side oil seal on the turbo. So I actually am probably saving myself and the customer a really big headache, because if it has a chance of running away from that, my luck, it would run away within the first year or so, and it pointed at me that I caused a runaway. And if you're wondering, runaway, if you're not familiar with diesels, a runaway would be when, since diesel is a compression ignition, so its compression ratio is extremely high. Diesel fuel has to be compressed, and it ignites from the compression. Basically, diesels can run off of all kinds of other fluids. So if you get a little bit of tranny fluid, it can mix really well and fire. But if the turbocharger leaks on the compressor side, and it leaks enough, and the engine gets running on diesel, but then it is then feeding off itself. It's using its own oil supply, and you shut I go to shut the engine off, but the engine keeps running because it's feeding from that compressor side oil seal, then that's a runaway. So the engine will just continually rev until it blows up. I've seen one in my life, and that was pretty impressive. That was when I was at the dealership. That was years ago, and what was it? It was putting so much smoke in the air that it looked like the building was on fire, and so we had to call 911 just to notify them that the building was not on fire, and the fire department came anyway, and there was nothing they could do, because you don't want to get close to a runaway, because you might get hit by shrapnel from the engine. That engine, I don't think it really blew up a lot, but the weird thing was, I was talking to I got to shadow and work with the diesel tech that worked on that. I think I was in my early 20s when that happened, and I worked there for 16 years. And in that time, though, I got to shadow that diesel mechanic and learn tons from him. I'm very thankful for that. And I remember talking to him about that. And after the fact, years down the road, and that was a fleet, a business owned that truck, and it ran away on him from, basically it fed off the turbo. He hadn't done any work to the turbo or any engine. I forgot what it was there diagnosing, and within a couple days, from what I understand, he said somebody had sent a wrecker down, and we're in Missouri, central Missouri, and that truck got picked up and taken away. Well, that wasn't insurance. I'd imagine that was probably Ford, because if I remember correctly, it was under warranty. So at that time, the 6.0, if I remember correctly, was still a fairly new engine, so I'm sure they were pretty hot on that one. So that was the only runaway I experienced. But off topic completely. I saw a squirrel. Basically, since that oil seal, found that. Now I need to do a complete rebuild on that turbo, and I actually have another turbo from a customer that they want me to rebuild it. So I need to order another kit. Well, I think I may have a kit that'll do the job. But yeah, tell you what, it's one thing after another lately. I'm busy. It's crazy. But I don't know if you came in late or whatever. I was talking about some of the diesel projects that I want to get going on. My goal is to get a bunch of these jobs, big projects that I have here, done, not bring on any more, and focus on smaller jobs. And then I'll be able to focus on my 6.0, which the block is still sitting on an engine stand over here. I've got the crank sitting over here in a bag. I've got cams and push rods and lifters and studs, and gaskets, and pistons that I had delip, the rods that are, I have Waggler rods that are extremely strong. I didn't need rods that heavy, but I guess it lets me do whatever I want. I really want to get that put together. I want to learn, I want to experience that, and then I want to tune it myself. And I will have emissions still on that truck. That truck will be emissions compliant. I think it's better to say emissions compliant and advance your skills in making the truck run better with clean exhaust, with the emissions, and advance yourself that way than to just delete. I've always thought that. I mean, it's emissions at times, yeah, it's a bummer that on the performance side of things, but it's just, even in the short period of time that I've been working on cars, which was basically the early 2000s, I still saw a lot of 90s cars at that time whenever I started at the dealership. And even in the short period of time, 20 something years that I've been doing it, I've noticed a drastic drop in basically emissions being around the vehicles. 90s cars smelled, you could see, even though they had catalytic converters, the smell of the exhaust was bad at times, and you couldn't run them in a shop for very long. You definitely had to hook up a hose. But it's like, when this is a 13 Explorer, I remember 2010, 8 to 10, and then present vehicles. I personally, in a huge shop that we had, the dealership I worked at, I was in the big truck area, so we had, I don't know how tall ceilings, 16, 18-foot ceilings, probably 16 foot because I think the doors were 14. And what we could have fit probably 6 to 7 semis in there if we needed to, which we never did. We didn't work on semis, but I'm just using that as a comparison. Not with the trailers, bobtailed, but it was that big of an area. And I remember I'd still work on cars when I'm working on diesels. Being a master tech, I had to work on basically anything. And I remember I'd have a car that it was something that the customer said would happen when running, and they notice it, you know, somewhere, and so you just leave the car running, and it might be January, February, and it's cold outside, and so you need to constantly monitor this thing. You don't want to run outside, so I'd leave it running in the shop, and you'd turn on an exhaust fan, but you wouldn't hook up the hose, and you never knew that car was running. It didn't stink in there like exhaust. It was unreal. I mean, it probably wasn't a good thing, but safety's not always first mind like that, but you don't think that being bad. But emissions have come a long way, and I mean, I'll give it up to the engineers that have found, you know, I just said engineers are like smart dumb people, but I wish I would have gone that route because I love doing, I love problem solving, I love figuring things out, and I think it would have been a blast to be involved in that stuff. Still do. I'd still like to do stuff, and I think that's why I'd love to get that injector flow bench going and have a engine to play on, have it running. That way I can learn things. I do test parts on that as well. I have some part ideas that I want to do, and that's another part. I think it'd be so cool to just do that stuff, just R&D, just play with stuff and see if you can make something better that is a common failure point. To me, that's fun to me. So I don't know. I guess I'm crazy, but then again, what is it? Being crazy. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Well, that's where I have trouble. Like factory work, I couldn't do. That's doing the same thing over and over. I give a lot of respect to factory workers. I couldn't do that at all. Okay. Well, we're almost 30 minutes, and that's really all I want to do is about 30 minutes today. It's been a hot day. I've been outside doing stuff too, and I'm just kind of beat today. Yeah, it's around here was that we're probably still in a drought, but the past 3 days we had rain, pretty good showers, so we've actually gotten some good moisture in the ground. It was getting to a point where dry areas in the ground had cracks in the ground, and so we've gotten some rain the past 3 days, and it was hot before. Now that we've gotten that rain, it's humid and the same temperature, and so you just walk outside and you can just feel it. It feels thick. So heat is one thing. I can deal with heat, but the humidity, the high humidity and heat, it just runs me down bad. So I don't know. But DF Repair, thank you very much. You have a good day. Hopefully you had a great day. It's about towards the end of the day, but I'll see you in the next one. I will be, next Wednesday. I'll try to have a topic then that we can actually discuss, or at least I can educate you guys on, and I'll try to do better next time. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. There it is. Having trouble.